Good evening, friends. The operational situation at the front by the end of the 9th of February. We will start with you, from the Skopinsk-Klemensky section of the front. We will briefly go through the Ponsk-Svitovsky section of the front. Positional fighting continues. However, it is worth noting one very important point in the context of tactical aviation of the Russian troops. Today there was a message from a rather tragic Sumy region. So, 7 bombs were dropped, killed, there are dead, there are wounded among the civilian population. But what does this mean in the first place? So we said that the enemy is increasing the pressure of tactical aviation. We spoke along the entire front line, and not only active, but also along the border, where there is a border with the Russian Federation and the Kharkiv region. However, naturally, there have not been such massive ones yet. 1, 2 to 3 were aerial bombs, and all of them were bombs at once. Well, as if it were too much, let's talk straight. But actually, you understand that now on the active front line, therefore, on the Kupiansk-Svitovsky segment, the enemy is now using a lot of tactical aviation. In fact, this allows him to destroy a number of positions, supports, fortress areas, and then conduct offensive actions. To date, we are witnessing mutual artillery shelling and strikes by enemy tactical aircraft. We do not fix any changes. As for the Lemansky direction, Terny, Torskaya, Yempolovka, we do not record any significant changes during today. Active hostilities continue. The enemy does not abandon attempts to advance in the western direction. Seversky direction, Bologorovka. We have said that there are still a number of points to clarify. Somewhere we have even reduced the gray zone, where there were a number of positions in court that the enemy published on personnel. But there is, unfortunately, an opponent of promotion. We are in the southeast of Bologorovka, near the station. It means that the enemy attacked from several directions, from the territory of the station in a northwesterly direction, as well as along one of the forest belts. And today the footage was published. So, according to geolinking, I published 3 geopoints in my telegram, where Russian troops were. One of them is located approximately in this area. It's an armored car. They attacked just the same, along the forest belt. Russian troops were advancing in a southerly direction, in a southwesterly direction. Or rather their main point on the map, which they are making, on which they are betting, is approximately this area. Knock out the Yapu, and take a number of positions at the support. We managed to repel an attack somewhere, but unfortunately, we also record the enemy's advance in one of the positions near the building. Here, on a section with a front width of up to 200 meters to a depth of up to 250 meters, we record the enemy's advance. At the same time, a number of positions remain to be clarified. Well, if they attacked from the forest belt, as you understand, and managed to repel in this area, naturally, the protrusion of the gray zone remains questionable for us. Well, we state that active hostilities are continuing, so the situation remains for further clarification. We will expect new personnel or official information from this site. According to the Bakhmut direction, today on Fridays as usual, one of the soldiers of the 93rd Brigade, on his channel, published a summary of what happened during the week and all the current news. So, along with this summary, the enemy also published footage today, which unfortunately confirms what our fighters are talking about. From the Bogdanovka area, they attacked without any changes, in Bogdanovka itself also without any changes, but south of Bogdanovka. Between Bogdanovka and Kromova, it is reported that the enemy has a small advance. It means that the attack was supported by armored vehicles. There was a call from the forest belt, a check-in in the direction of the Popovsky forest. Well, actually, the enemy published these shots, came close. So this means that we have a small protrusion from the tree plantings. We have it first, and behind it, respectively, is the Popovsky forest, a small plot. Naturally, the territory of the cemetery remains in question now, and one of the forest belts with several supports passes over the cemetery, because the attack was from north to south, and not from east to west or southwest. Therefore, a number of positions remain to be clarified. We are marking a gray zone today, but here I repeat, it should be red. But we are also clarifying exactly where and how the enemy has advanced, what is happening in the area of the railway, whether they were able to take positions, so we are clarifying. I think there will be a clearer picture within 24 hours. To date, we have added a gray zone where there was an attack, and again the result of the battle is unknown in this area, due to the fact that this is the latest news that we have today. But, as we see, there is one feature. Actually, the fighter himself recorded our video today, and there was snow, a blizzard and a similar situation according to footage from an enemy drone. A strong wind, a blizzard, and of course, the Russian troops took advantage. We have talked about this a lot. As soon as there is a deterioration in weather conditions, you probably already understand this. Immediately the enemy goes on the attack, as soon as the effectiveness of aerial reconnaissance decreases. And actually, we see that now another attack has been launched on this sector of the front. Active hostilities continue between Ivanovsky and Kleshivka, and the situation here remains dynamic. Actually, somewhere the Russian troops managed to advance, somewhere the defense forces managed to counterattack, and accordingly knock out Russian troops from a number of positions, but everything remains within our gray zone, because as we see, none of the parties has confident control in this area now. But, at the same time, yes, most of the attacks are coming from the Russian troops, and the vector is now changing to Ivanovskaya, which we predicted in principle. However, these are not the forces involved, which the fighters themselves had previously said from the field, that Russian troops. The Russian command in Bakhmut concentrated a large enough group. Naturally for offensive actions they are in order to wait out the winter there. And this is most likely a trip to Ivanovsko. Well, as they say, we will look, because today this is the situation we have on this section of the front. We are moving to the Avdiivka direction, the northern flank. According to the summary of the General Staff, there were attacks in the direction of Novobakhmutovka, in the Stepovoy area. These attacks were repelled, but they have more, as we like to say with you, these attacks are now a distraction, because of course it is necessary to stretch our forces to the enemy, in order to have greater success in Avdiivka itself, on which he is betting. Therefore, we are now seeing a lot of such attacks, along the entire front line, especially the Avdiivka direction. Well, we move to the north of Avdiivka, the northern flank, north of Avdiivka. Everything that is happening now. By the evening we added some clarifications on the streets. Again, there is a lot of disinformation coming in today, a lot I repeat. So we need to wait for some moments for what is being commented on, along which streets there are fights, along which streets there are advances, because one of the goals of information warfare is to confuse, naturally, undermine morale, and so on and so on. To show that they are moving forward where they actually are not. But let's clarify. So, the situation in the evening is such that we have advanced along Lasia Ukrainka Street, and now the pressure is along Sapranova Street, and further along Losia Ukrainka Street and along Donetsk Street. This is where the most activity is. Naturally, we talked about this, and we will observe activity on the site of the gray zone and the control zone of the Viso. Why? Because the Russian troops want to attack with a wider coverage, first of all, the sensor that they are storming. But now they are storming with small infantry groups, they manage to repel a number of attacks, but at the same time, there is a carpool that they are targeting. Well, plus there are garages located here, and garages are pits. Well, actually the basements are classic, where they can wait out artillery strikes, and it's relatively safe to be. There is such a moment. Therefore, now the main task for them is Lasia Ukrainka Street, Donetsk Street, and Chistyakova Street, to advance along 3 streets, so to speak, to align the front line, and try to attack with a wider coverage already, to carry out assault actions on the Carpool and the Garden Association. As for the direction to the center of Avdiivka, it means that to the south along independent streets, Sapernev Street, Perstravnev Street, Stepnaya Street. Active hostilities continue, but what I started with, there is a lot of contradictory information now. A lot. Including the area of the sand pit, there is also a lot of contradictory information, because there were reports that they were now moving along the shoreline of the sand pit, so along the shoreline, and tried to go to the Garden Association on Stepovoye Street. There is such a moment, but it's all, let's say, at the level of messages that are not visually confirmed. And yes, one more moment back. It means that the Garden Association was asked to comment in more detail, which we have in the Eastern Avdiivsky, as a scheme. What is happening here? Because there are also a lot of messages, a lot of misinformation. So, today the footage was published by the 110th Brigade, which works on the ground. And actually, according to geolinking, the enemy is within the gray zone, and a number of attacks that were from the EPU. Drops from drones, they are just at the junction of the gray zone, that is, the enemy is right here. But the information anyway in case of visual confirmation that they managed to enter the territory of the Garden Association. There are really present on the outskirts. There was also a rotation of a number of points, well, that is, they regularly introduce fresh forces, as we see, because they regularly rotate. There is such a moment, well, and naturally their routes are being caught now during rotation, and they are being worked out by dropping drones. But in no case can we write off that the enemy still has huge forces in this sector of the front, so the assault operations continue. On the eastern flank, we did not receive any new information for the evening. In the south of Avdiivka, there are still fighting operations in the area of the Tsarskaya Okhota complex, as well as attacks by small infantry groups from Russian troops in several directions, including attempts to further advance along several streets in the southern part of Avdiivka itself, but without any changes. And from the experienced area, but I would say this is more of a positional nature of the fighting, because they retreated to their original positions, although we also observe activity in this sector of the front. But now there is a big bet, a lot of work by the enemy artillery, support for the artillery of long-range tactical aviation. It is focused on Avdiivka itself, on its northern part, and Avdiivka is like Sahim, because today, as well as yesterday, the day before yesterday, it is reported from the field that a huge number of airstrikes were bombs. And this is not FAP 500, if we speak as for the Sumy region, the Zakobinsk-Lyman section of the front. These are 1.5 trucks, 1,500 are being dropped, so this is the picture, very very complicated. Another one was from the questions, and today our fighters from the field reported this information exactly on Bologorovka Lugansk, which we commented on earlier with you, and questions. According to the tunnels, will the enemy be able to use this tactic further? After all, this is the effect of surprise, for which we can speak. There is also a struggle going on, where to strike what kind of blow. And the effect of surprise always has a positive effect for those who attack. Look, on the site of Bologorovka Lugansk, there was a message, this is reliable information directly from the field, that the opponents also have a number of tunnels. In other words, they similarly used the same tactics there. As I said, most likely this will shift to tactics in general, which will be used on the entire front. I will publish a link to the messages and the fighter to his telegram a little later in my telegram, so this moment means. But the fact remains that the enemy, realizing how dangerous drones are, the sky is dangerous, how much it becomes, and in singing saturation drones, was able to show ingenuity, and actually underground these are the tunnels, digs, pipes. They are now giving him the opportunity for such promotions. Because judging from the shots that appear, well, I will say, that in the Seversk direction, from what I saw today, from the Avdiivka direction, what I saw today, drones are playing a very very serious role. Extremely serious, because they stop, do not allow the troops to rotate normally, respectively, do not give the opportunity to carry out the amount of assault actions that the enemy plans, and due to the cheapness, they can naturally be used more and more if compared with artillery. But, it is clear that they also have some drawback. A number of disadvantages and advantages. This is such a moment. We let go, but still managed to stop. Moving on. May Day. The assault operations continue. They continue not only in Pervomaysky itself. Today, the General Staff also confirms that there were attacks from Russian troops east of Novelsky, what we talked about. They will attempt to level the front line. Well, initially, I would say from the position of Vostok-Nonevelsky to Pervomaysky, and then with Vodyanov, Vodyan, Pervomayskoy, Vostok-Nonevelsko. To date, there are active hostilities both in Pervomaysky and Vostok-Nonevelsky. But east of Novelsky, there is a minimal amount of equipment and manpower involved on the part of Russian troops. This is more again a distortion of forces, distracting strikes and so on. But in general, they have a considerable concentration, let's say, in this sector of the front, but they are not using it now. So to speak, they are also waiting for the moment. According to Georgievka, there were a number of questions. Why did I actually leave the gray zone yesterday? So one of the enemy's positions was in one of the houses in this area. Why did you leave the gray zone? They are red, because Russian troops were knocked out of a number of positions there, but they reached the T-shaped intersection. In fact, they gained a foothold in a number of positions. The situation at the clarification remains only in this square. Whether or not Russian troops are present, but in any case, they are not reducing pressure on this sector of the front, as well as in the direction of victory, they are only increasing it today. We did not receive any new information about Novomikhailovka by the evening, so the situation remains under clarification. There are no new shots from drones, or even messages from the enemy, even if it would be disinformation. There is nothing to be guided by something, at least, what they write. Therefore, most likely, the message that was from our sources, that it was possible to push back the Russian troops, most likely it is, because there were no new reports that they were moving further, neither from our side nor from their side. And again, there is no visual confirmation of anything today, unfortunately, yet. The Novoselkovsky direction is great without changes, the Orekhovsky section of the front, by the evening, by the end of the 9th of February, without any changes. And by the way, active hostilities continue, but mostly it is the work of drones and artillery. Small infantry groups of Russian troops attempted to attack from the forest. Now I'm just visualizing a little bit on the map what was happening. So the most active, I would say, is approximately this area. They still planned to cut the AFU forces in two, as before, but they managed to counterattack somewhere with drone drops, somewhere with artillery, but in general we do not record any changes. But from time to time, Russian troops appear on the outskirts, make attempts to cling and gain a foothold in a number of houses, but we do not record any changes, I repeat, in this sector of the front. This is the situation we have by the end of the 9th of February.